Hi, welcome back to part 2 of our review of the Warrior Ritual G7 Pro equipment. In this video, we're going to be breaking down the main differences in specs between the G7 and 7.1 blockers. Obviously, there are only sort of minor differences, but Warrior have created slightly different specs between each one just to allow the goalies just to tailor their preferences as much as possible. You'll hear me say quite often that most people think a blocker is just a blocker. In some ways, yes, but there are sort of minor details that goalies can choose on these two blockers just to make sure they've got one that's absolutely perfect for them. So we're going to break down the differences between the two. So if we start with the G7, so on the G7, it has a 20-degree board angle, so it's slightly sort of straighter board angle, and that is designed to create sort of high rebounds, so rebounds that create elevation up towards the glass and away from the net so that they're sort of out of danger. It has a slightly thicker board, so if we turn it with the 7.1 there, it's very, very subtle, but you can see, especially in this part, that it is thicker on the G7 there. So what that allows is for some slightly denser materials in the blocker board there for the maximum rebound speed. What you want when a puck comes off the blocker is it to get as far away as quickly as possible. So by having some sort of denser materials on the blocking surface there, it enables that really, really well. The flatter board on the G7 also allows for sort of maximum coverage, and it presents a larger blocking surface for the puck there. So not having that curve allows the blocker to essentially stand up a bit taller, have a bigger blocking surface to essentially cover more net. With it being thicker, it is ever so slightly heavier than the 7.1. Not really noticeable, so I think the difference is only 10 grams, but with a thicker board and more materials, inevitably comes a little bit more weight. So yeah, I don't think you'll notice that on your hand. I've tried both of these on, and they both feel extremely well balanced. They don't feel heavy on the hand whatsoever. But naturally, you have to sort of point out the differences between the two, and if it is thicker and has more materials in it, it's going to be ever so slightly heavier. So it feels great. I mean, obviously this would be the same for both, but the palm feels really nice and durable. It's sort of nice and soft and mobile on there. I really like the adjustability. You can fully adjust the finger protection there to be as loose or as tight as you want. On the cuff here, it's a nice sort of curved cuff which you can have strapped slightly higher up or lower down depending on how much mobility you need in your wrist there. And both as well have removable palms in there, so you can change the size of the palm depending on the size of your hand. This is a large size, which fits me perfectly. I wouldn't say I have particularly big hands, but the large seems to fit me perfectly, so I wouldn't want to go any smaller than that. But yeah, it feels really, really comfortable. A quick pause in the video here, guys. I've made a small mistake in the video. I've said that it's the G7 and the G7.1 that have the removable palms. It is in fact only the G.7 that has the removable palms. So apologies for the mistake there, but I want to make sure that you all have the correct information before you carry on watching the video. So let's move on to the 7.1. So with the 7.1, it has a 35-degree board angle. So it has a lot more curve towards the top there. And what that allows to do is to create sort of lower rebounds that you can push down into the corners and away from the net, but not sort of high up on the glass. So it's designed to have sort of more of a downward facing angle naturally. So as you put your rebounds out, it's going to go on the ice towards the corners rather than up towards the glass. So again, preference on how you play. One's not necessarily better than the other. It's just a case of where you prefer to place your rebounds as a goalie. So the 7.1 has a thinner board. So ever so slightly reduced rebound speed. Without trying it, I can't necessarily comment, but I wouldn't imagine that it's massively noticeable between the two. But with sort of less sort of dense materials in the blocker, yes, it's thinner, but naturally you're going to give up a little bit of rebound pop off that as well. Because of the more curve in the top of the blocker, you are going to have slightly more mobility, especially when you're sort of paddle down on the ice, because that curve is staying out of the way of your arm a little bit. So that's really interesting to see. I'm going to test both of these on the ice, so I'll let you know which one I prefer and whether that is a noticeable feature there. And naturally, because it's a thinner board, this one's lighter. As I mentioned, the G7 is about 10 grams heavier than the 7.1. Having just tried them on now, I don't really notice a difference. So it's a negligible difference, but it's one that's worth pointing out anyway. So yeah, that's the two blockers. They both feel great to me. I don't know whether I prefer one over the other until I try them on the ice. So you'll be the first to know as and when I do try them out. So please stay tuned for part 3, where we're going to be breaking down the differences between the two catcher specs.